Welcome to Module 2 of the OPWL APA Style Basics video series. I'm Carol Porter, and in this module, we'll look at what you need to cite in your assignments. It's more than many people think. Topics that we will discuss in Module 2 include what must be cited, what doesn't need to be cited, and the concept of common knowledge, how to include materials from other sources using quotations, paraphrases, and summaries, and when you may need to request permission from the copyright holder to include materials from another source in your work. So, what do you need to cite? Most people know that they need to cite material that they quote directly from other sources, but many are not aware of everything that they need to cite. Simply put, you need to cite everything that you read, hear, or see that you include in your assignment. Your citations provide important background that enables your reader to critically evaluate your position. That means that you need to cite anything that you read, whether it is a book, an article in a journal, magazine, newspaper, or newsletter, on a website, on social media, or somewhere else. Heard, whether it was in an interview, a lecture, on a podcast, in a broadcast, or some other way. Saw, whether it was in a video, a film, in person, or somewhere else. Or have submitted for publication or grading before. Just because you wrote it doesn't mean you can use it. If you want to use something that you published, you need to cite and reference it just like any other source. And if you want to use material that you submitted for grading previously, you must get permission from your instructor first. Then you cite it and reference it. It's generally not a problem to get permission if it's a small part of an assignment or a description of a situation or a case study that you want to explore from a different angle. But using it without permission can get you into trouble. See Boise State's policy on academic dishonesty for more details. The golden rule of citations is, when in doubt, cite. You're not likely to get in trouble for citing a source when it's not absolutely necessary, but you can get into serious trouble if you fail to cite something that is necessary. Or even better, when in doubt, ask your instructor. When it comes to the APA style, you can think of your instructor as your editor, the person with the final say about what is required for your assignment. Wow, that's a lot to cite, isn't it? You may be asking yourself if there's anything that you don't need to cite. Well, in fact, there are a couple of things that you don't need to cite. First, your own thoughts and ideas that you've not already submitted for grading or publication. This can be very helpful when you're reading through your paper before submitting it, because if you read through it and find that there isn't much that isn't cited, it's a good indication that you have some more thinking and writing to do. It is great to show what everybody else has said about a topic, but your own analysis of their conclusions and synthesis of the different ideas is just as important. Secondly, you don't need to cite what's common knowledge. Information that is widely known, undisputed, and easily verifiable. Things like facts, figures, events, and dates that your audience will be familiar with. This can get a bit tricky. In high schools, they often simplify this concept by saying that common knowledge is anything that you can find in the encyclopedia, but that doesn't really work in graduate school. Some universities say that if you can find the same knowledge undocumented in at least 5 credible sources, you consider it common knowledge. Ooh, sounds like a lot of work to identify, doesn't it? Deciding what is common knowledge also depends on the audience of your work. You wouldn't expect a group of engineers to be familiar with the same things as a group of instructional designers, would you? This is where the golden rule comes in handy. You might want to ask your instructor if you're not sure if you should cite something, or just cite it, because it doesn't usually hurt to cite something that you didn't need to cite, but you can get into real trouble if you don't. Now that you know what you need to cite, we should talk a little bit about how you incorporate what you read, saw, or heard into your assignment. Essentially, there are three ways. First, quotations are anything that you copy verbatim, that is, with no changes from the original source. Generally speaking, you want to keep quotations to a minimum in your assignments. You typically use them when the original author said something so eloquently that it's important to include their exact phrasing. Or you want to highlight that this author made this particular statement or claim. Or you just want to distance yourself from a statement or claim by using the author's voice rather than your own. The second way, paraphrases, are restatements of the information that you read, saw, or heard in your own words. They're approximately the same length as the original source, and you typically use them when you want to communicate an idea in its entirety, and you don't need or want to have it stand out from the flow of your document. The third, summaries, are a distillation of what the original source said in your own words. You typically use them when you want to communicate an idea concisely within the flow of your document. Now, it's important to remember that quotations require special formatting, either quotation marks if the quote is less than 40 words, or block style if it's 40 words or more. Neither the paraphrase nor the summary require any special formatting, and all three, quotations, paraphrases, and summaries, must be cited. Some students get into trouble because they have difficulty paraphrasing and summarizing. They leave the structure of the sentence the same and many of the words the same, and you're just not allowed to do that. So let's take a look at an example. First, let's look at a direct quotation from the 6th edition of the APA Publication Manual about quoting. It says, reproduce word for word material directly quoted from another author's work or from your own previously published work, material replicated from a test item, and verbatim instructions to participants. You can tell that it's an exact copy of what it says on page 170 because it's surrounded by quotation marks and followed by a citation. Remember, it's really important that you check your quotations to ensure they're an exact copy of what the original author wrote or said, because it's important not to misrepresent them in your work. Now, let's take a look at a paraphrase of the same material. When you copy the exact wording from a publication, an assessment instrument, or a list of directions, whether it is your own published work or someone else's, it's called quoting. You can tell that this is a paraphrase because it's about the same length as the quotation, just slightly shorter in this example. It contains about the same level of detail, it's not surrounded by quotation marks, and it's followed by a citation. You may notice I included the page number to make it easier to locate the information within the book. Including this information for paraphrases and summaries, as well as direct quotations, is recommended in both the 6th and 7th editions of the publication manual because it makes it easier for your reader to locate the information in a lengthy source, but it's not required for paraphrases. Note that the structure of the sentence is completely different than the original, and that the words are different than the original, even though they express the same idea. It's not enough to just change the words to similar words. You must change the structure of the sentence when you paraphrase. Now, let's look at a summary. Quoting is incorporating exactly what you read or heard into your work. You can tell that this is a summary because it's definitely shorter and less detailed than the original. Once again, it uses different wording and sentence structure. It's not surrounded by quotation marks, and it includes a citation. And once again, I've included the page number because it makes it easier for your reader. It's recommended, but not required for summaries either. When do you need to get permission? Just because you cite something doesn't mean that you can use it. Sometimes you need to request permission from the copyright holder before you can include it in your work. Typically, you are permitted to quote, summarize, or paraphrase short passages from books, articles, and other sources, and typically, lengthy passages, models, pictures, graphics, clip art, images from websites, tables, test items, questionnaires, datasets, and so forth will require permission from the copyright holder to include, regardless of whether you're planning to reprint them exactly as they appeared in the original or to adapt them in some way. Once you have permission, rather than use the standard APA style citation for this material, you need to include a copyright attribution, which provides details about the original work, the name of the copyright holder, and the nature of their permission, and then the standard APA style reference for the original work in your reference list. The copyright attribution should follow tables, figures, or graphics directly in the general note for the table or figure, or be included in a footnote for test items, questionnaires, or long quotations. It follows this format: from for material that is copied directly from the original, or adapted from for material that is adapted from the original, followed by the source information, usually the title, author, year of publication, and where you found it. Then the copyright year and the name of the copyright holder, and finally the permission statement requested by the copyright holder, usually something like reprinted or adapted with permission. For most OPWL assignments, however, drawing on the principle of fair use for educational purposes, you're permitted to copy or adapt tables or figures from your course readings or library research without requesting permission from the author or copyright holder, so long as you provide suitable attribution. However, if you're planning to publish the material, you'll need to request appropriate permissions from the author or copyright holder before submitting your work for publication. Just remember, if you aren't sure, you can always ask your instructor to clarify what they expect for your assignment. Congratulations! You've now completed the second module of the OPWL Department's APA Style Basics video series. To maximize your learning, now is a good time to jot down any final thoughts you have about what you just watched, complete the Blackboard review quiz from Module 2, which will help you identify any gaps in your learning and perhaps correct any misunderstandings that you might have, and post any final questions that you have for your instructor. Then feel free to move on to Module 3.